Welcome everybody to the Institute for Government. It's a slightly gloomy day, but we're going to brighten up your morning with some discussion about the future of digital government. The Institute for Government cares a lot about digital government because we are interested in seeing government be more effective and work better for citizens and more efficient. So we do all we can to support the process of making government more digital and better. We're not expecting any fire alarms today. Should an alarm go off, please go out the way you came in and assemble by the statue of King George. Thank you very much to SAP for sponsoring this event today. You have on the wall here some necessary hashtags and other Twitter tags. So please, if you feel inclined to fiddle with the marvellous computer in your pocket, make sure it's a tweet and not anything else. I believe that this is the first statement since the election about digital government. So we are really very pleased indeed to welcome the Minister for Government Resilience and Efficiency, which includes digital government, Caroline Nokes MP. Please join me in welcoming Caroline Nokes MP.
Thank you, Daniel, and I'm struck that I think the last time I was in this room, this very room, was as part of the Education Select Committee, gosh, probably 2 years plus ago, when we were having our away day and discussing our priorities for what the Select Committee was going to be doing over the forthcoming Parliament. Interestingly, we were interrupted mid-flow by a division bell, which saw the chairman leading us in some sort of bizarre, almost tour guide fashion across the park at high speed, only for the division to be abandoned midway through and us all to turn around and hike back again. I have good news for you. There aren't going to be any division bells this morning. In fact, any voting that I'm doing over the next 24 hours is going to be restricted to the wee small hours of tomorrow morning. The priorities for digital government, and I have to say it's a real pleasure to be here this morning, and apologies for getting you all out of bed very early. I think one of the benefits of being the Minister for Government Resilience is that you have to demonstrate how resilient you are, and fortunately I'm a very early riser. So, every government has a duty to meet the needs and expectations of the people it serves. That is certainly far from a new idea, and for democratic governments this has always been the case. But what is changing is how we meet those needs and expectations. And a modern government has a responsibility to identify and implement new tools and technologies. It meets people where they are. It assists them in a way and to a standard that they expect, and it is enabling, not obstructive. The digital age has given us an incredible level of convenience, and increased convenience means raised expectations. And that is not a bar that has been set by governments. It is set every single day by organisations like Tesco's, John Lewis, Amazon. I know that what I want today I can get delivered tomorrow, and better than that, I can change my mind up until 11 o'clock tonight. I know that I can book a flight. I can check in online. I can have my boarding pass sent direct to my phone, and it will all be done pretty much immediately. It leads to a world where we act far more spontaneously than has ever been the case before. And in the past, and it's best that I be brutally honest, the government hasn't been quick enough to embrace the digital tools that could improve life for citizens and indeed for itself. 2,000 separate government websites didn't make a great deal of sense. One single trusted home for government did. Gov.uk is an ongoing source of inspiration and reference, and our counterparts in the Australian government recently called Gov.uk their first go-to. The work of the past 6 years means that now the UK leads in the United Nations rankings for e-government, and we still want to break new ground, innovate, and stay on top. And we're confident that we can. The UK remains prosperous in the digital world. We're Europe's #1 hub for technology investment, and we've seen record levels of capital flow into the country. Since the start of this year, investment in London's tech sector has exceeded £6.3 billion, and London has attracted more venture capital investment than any other European city since the European referendum. We cannot think about the future without thinking about digital technology. It has enabled us to work in a smarter way, and we've achieved a great deal through initiatives like the Digital Marketplace, Government as a Platform, and gov.uk. Earlier this year, we published the Government Transformation Strategy. It sets out how we're going to build for our digital future. And I want to tell you how we're delivering against the objectives set out in the strategy and how we're doing this in a robust and secure way. And the first thing I want to talk about is people, but perhaps in two contexts. Because actually, this isn't about government for the sake of government. We do well to remember at all times that we're doing this for the citizens that we serve. I think on my first visit to GDS, very shortly after I was appointed to the Cabinet Office, I made that point very clearly to them, that this is not about being better at digital government to stay at the top of world rankings. This is about making sure that we're delivering services effectively, promptly for our citizens. It's about making their lives easier, and how we do it is absolutely key. I'd just like to use as one example something that, and you will find every Member of Parliament does this from time to time, to lapse into talking about their own constituency. I vividly remember the summer of 2014, when I had in the region of 30 constituents contact me in a panic because their passport hadn't arrived in time for or in good time for their holiday. We worked incredibly hard. There wasn't an email that went unanswered or a phone call that wasn't returned to make sure that the people of Romsey and Southampton North went on their holidays. It was a wonderful summer for me. I had more postcards from different places around the globe, photographs sent to me from cruise ships, and even a couple of bottles of wine from holidays in Tuscany. However, we have improved that service. We have made a real difference, and nothing makes me happier than the fact that over the past 3 summers since then, I haven't had a single call from a single constituent asking me where their passport is. But the second aspect of people is, of course, our people. As the Minister with responsibility for the civil service workforce, I know how imperative it is that the civil service is equipped with the skills and capabilities to respond to priorities and meet our challenges. Through the workforce plan, we are building the civil service's professional and functional capability and the skills and leadership of the people within them. This is creating the professionals who will be able to deliver significant transformation across the civil service, with the flexibility to direct resource to the most pressing challenges as required. Transformation can only happen when you have the right people with the right skills in the right places. We are working on some of the world's largest and most complex technical projects, from software engineers to user researchers, content designers to product managers, analysts to data scientists. It takes skilled, talented, delivery-focused people to make government transformation a reality. So, we are fundamentally changing the shape of the civil service workforce to ensure it has the right capabilities now and for the future. We want to attract and retain talent. We have built the UK's first national framework of digital data and technology jobs. This is a common set of roles, skills, and career paths. This creates consistency. It makes it easier for government to hire digital data and technology professionals, and it supports those who wish to build a career in the public sector. The GDS Academy also helps to develop and grow our own talent. Every year, 3,000 civil servants nationwide will train at the Academy. We are promoting opportunities in government. There are initiatives open to current civil servants, and we have established emerging talent schemes for apprentices, for interns, and for graduates. As well as developing the right skills and capability, we are building a digital infrastructure that will facilitate transformation. I mentioned gov.uk earlier, the online home of government services and information, which recently celebrated its 5th birthday and 4 billionth visit. It is a prime example of how we are transforming our digital infrastructure. Following its success, we have developed a platform approach in order to build a range of tools and components that can be used across government as they create user-focused digital services. We know that reinventing the wheel every single time we need a solution leads to duplication, to disjointedness, and to waste. There was a clear need to build common solutions to common problems. Things like how to let users know about the progress of something or how to take payments. We call this approach government as a platform. Government receives millions of calls every year from people anxious for a progress update. For example, as I said earlier, on the status of their passport application. Being kept on hold is frustrating for people, and running call centres is expensive. Gov.uk Notify makes it easy for people to stay informed by allowing service teams across government to send text messages, emails or letters to their users before they get anxious enough to call. Over 15 million messages have been sent through Notify. The Valuation Office Agency is using Notify to keep businesses informed about changes to their rates. It has saved the Environment Agency £150,000 in procurement and implementation costs, £20,000 in management costs, and £50,000 has been saved on paper and postage. Meanwhile, over 500,000 payment transactions have been processed through Gov.uk Pay, the new, simple and secure way to pay for government services. It is now easier and more efficient for government to process payments. It saves time and effort for service teams across government. It's used by the Ministry of Justice, by the Border Force, Her Majesty's courts and tribunals, and the Office of the Public Guardian. We're also starting to make Gov.uk Pay available to local authorities. Digital identity is an essential part of the transformation of government because it will enable government to give people access to their data and services digitally rather than having to attend in person, make phone calls or send things through the post. As we bring more services online, we will make it possible for people to see and update personal information such as details of your company car tax. We are giving people the ability to complete financial transactions with government entirely online. And as we do this, we need to make sure people have the correct access to their own records and services. Gov.uk Verify replaces face-to-face and postal methods of identity proofing and verification. It meets the highest levels of government and international standards for security and data protection, so you can be confident that your identity is protected. These three services, Pay, Notify and Verify, are just three examples of how this approach allows us to build reliable, user-focused services with digital components efficiently. It makes services easier to create and cheaper to run. Now, over 100 services across 26 departments and agencies use government as a platform common components. As well as having a common approach to tools, government should have a common approach to data. That means we should store, manage and use our data effectively and responsibly. We should take advantage of the opportunities that data gives us to deliver the best policies and services. Our work with data is particularly important. It is vital for transparency and it is critical to enabling transformation across government and the private sector. Our first step is to modernise government's data infrastructure. Data should be easy to find, to access and to use. We are working with departments on gov.uk registers, which make government data more accurate and accessible. They are authoritative lists of up-to-date data that can be used both inside and outside government. From policy professionals to journalists writing articles, they are the gold standard. As an example, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office's country register is the most accurate and up-to-date list of countries. The register is being used by services such as the e-petition service already. Over time, the country register will replace many of the country lists that are published on gov.uk. The Register of English Local Authorities is, as the name might suggest, the single list of all local authorities. Previously, many lists existed, and they varied in both content and quality. Now everyone can use the same accurate data. We're also making it easier for government to publish and use data through data.gov.uk. Doing this will help us continue to open up data so that we can access, analyse and use it properly. To take advantage of all this, the government needs a coordinated approach to how it uses data. We're updating policy through the Digital Economy Act, and because effective, ethical governance is the key to successful innovation with data, we're updating the data science ethical framework. This will outline the processes and safeguards around how government uses data. I've talked about building things, but sometimes the right things already exist. When this is the case, we must help government to buy the right products, tools and services to enable transformation. Efficiency doesn't mean cutting spending. In fact, smart spending is vital. And we're improving the ease with which people in government can buy what they need to. The digital marketplace is how we're doing this. Government now coordinates technology and digital spending centrally through it. £2.6 billion has been spent through the digital marketplace, with 45% going to small and medium-sized businesses. SMEs are the backbone of the UK economy, fueling economic growth and providing more than 15 million jobs. These businesses also play a vital role in helping government to deliver excellent public services that meet the needs of our citizens and provide value for money for the taxpayer. Efficiency is vital, but we have to keep in mind that the services we are building are themselves designed to save us money. We are delivering 40 major government programmes, including digital reform of the court system and the NHS Procurement Transformation Programme. That will increase the buying power of NHS trusts to get lower prices on clinical products. We expect that in total these programmes will deliver £71.1 billion worth of savings over their lifespans. By 2020, we will have delivered at least 89 digital services, including a new digital mortgage service and an online divorce service. Anyone who has been through the hideousness of either of those two processes will know that they need to improve. They are designed to improve the interaction between government and the people it serves. I spoke earlier about how government had spent a lot of time playing catch-up. Now I want to tell you about 3 things we're doing to ensure that we don't have to play catch-up again. Firstly, when we launched gov.uk, it was all about the website. It was all about consolidating and simplifying content. Our work today is about structuring services and information on gov.uk to ensure that government's content can be accessed and reused by any technology, such as voice assists like Siri and Alexa. This work is vital. It means that people can always find and use government services however they choose to access them. It means reducing mistakes, and it means saving the taxpayer money. Secondly, we are continuing to learn from the best that the private sector has to offer. The banking industry, for example, is using sandboxes that allow businesses to test innovative products, services, business models and delivery mechanisms in the real market with real consumers. We are thinking about how they could be applied to government. And we are now taking steps to formalise how we handle innovation and approach new technologies. Thirdly, our prosperity depends on our ability to secure our technology, data and networks. Cyber attacks are growing more frequent, more sophisticated and more damaging when they succeed. So we are taking action to protect both our economy and the privacy of UK citizens. The National Cyber Security Centre took action against 590 cyber threats and attacks in its first year. The National Cyber Security Strategy sets out our plan to make Britain confident, capable and resilient in the digital world. Over the lifetime of the 5-year strategy, we will invest £1.9 billion in defending our systems and our infrastructure. For example, we are restricting access to specific domains and websites that are known sources of malware, and we are deploying an email verification system on government networks to protect against malicious phishing emails. We have enjoyed huge success in building the outstanding digital government we see today. We have delivered and are delivering to make life easier for citizens and civil servants alike. The creation of gov.uk proved the art of the possible, and the digital marketplace has opened up procurement and increased the transparency of government. I'm proud of our work so far. I'm excited and ambitious for what we will achieve in the future, because I know 2 things are certain. Technology will continue to change, and whatever that change looks like, government will continue to serve. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you very much, Minister. Well, I'll abuse my position as chair and ask you a couple of questions before throwing it open to the audience. Weaved through your speech was some things that the centre of government is doing and some things that departments and agencies are doing. How would you see the role of the centre of government in driving digital transformation?
So I think at the centre we have a hugely coordinating role. I'm very conscious that GDS works with all different government departments. I think it is fair to say, some more than others, and I think it's also fair to say that at the current time we have some departments that are under more pressure than others, some facing greater challenges. I think my focus is very much on making sure that GDS has the ability to work specifically with the Department for Exiting the EU to make sure that they have the tools that they need to deliver as smooth a transition as possible. Not that I pretend that that's easy.
So Brexit is clearly going to be an important challenge, and digital has a key role to play in that. You mentioned some of the things like verify and pay and notify that the centre is actually building. I don't know if you've had a chance to have a look at this. I'm going to plug my report here, which talks about the role of the centre of government and very much focusing on the role in setting standards across the system. You talked about cyber security, and that's obviously one of the key areas where the centre has a role. But one of the things that Martha Lane Fox wrote about back when she was sort of driving the creation of gov.uk was the need to create, it's a rather techie expression, but API standards at the centre of government. So really setting the technical standards by which you can kind of create Lego government, where you can sort of slot different bits of government together. How do you see the role of standards at the centre?
So I think that the standards that underpin all of our work are absolutely crucial. I quite like the phrase Lego government.
It's not mine, I have to
okay,
say.
Well, we'll take a little bit of plagiarism
it.
there. But I think actually that's the thing that strikes me, is that too often government is far too siloed, and departments can, not always, but can have a tendency to think about themselves first and not be more collaborative with their near neighbouring departments. And I think absolutely a crucial part of this is making sure that we bring departments on board with our digital agenda, that the ones that are customer facing, I'm going to give them credit where it's due, have been pretty upfront and helpful, constructive. Other departments don't have so much interaction with citizens, with customers, and we want to bring them on board with our transformational change as well. Everything that we do, though, has to be underpinned by a really rigorous set of standards. We're not a multinational, we're not the private sector. We have to put security of citizens and their data first. This may not surprise you. I spent some time yesterday flicking through the transformation strategy and looking at the words of one of my predecessors in the Cabinet Office, who was making the point that actually the functions and the roles that we perform are enormous. Much bigger than any multinational company, but at our heart we have the citizens, the constituents that I spoke about, and I think my abiding concern is that we keep them and their data safe, and that is a huge challenge in the current world.
As the Prime Minister was saying yesterday. So another of your predecessors, Francis Maude, talked about some of the resistance that he encountered as Minister in the Cabinet Office. He said he was sadly disillusioned by the extent of sheer inertia, obstruction, and sometimes active obstruction in relation to the agenda he was sort of driving from the Cabinet Office. You've also got pay and rations for the civil service, as I understand it. I mean, are you getting resistance to this agenda?
So I'm going to divert a little bit to begin with and say that I have a phenomenal amount of time for Francis, and when I was first a Conservative Party candidate for the seat of what used to be Romsey way back in 2002, I can remember Francis being very kind and helpful and proffering some fantastic advice at what was, probably one of the most challenging times in my life. So I have a massive amount of time for Francis and a huge amount of respect for what he did back in 2010 when we came into government in the coalition. And I don't think anyone would veer away from saying that Francis had a vision where GDS was set up to be a disruptor. I think it has broadly come of age, and fair to say that you have to have a system that will work with government. Now, as you said, I'm the Minister for the harsh term, pay and rations. And I spent a very happy year in the Department for Work and Pensions, working with a wide range of civil servants, many of whom were on the front line. And I get to see a broad range of policy officials as well as people who are delivering our frontline services. I have a huge amount of respect for our civil servants, and I can honestly put my hand on my heart and say I have never found one who is in any way obstructive. I think, to be brutally candid, I always want to see the process of change to be faster. But government is big. Government does have a tendency to be slow, but this is on occasion like trying to turn around the proverbial oil tanker, isn't it? So I think we have to, from the centre and from the top, show direction of travel, show determination. And sporadically as a minister, you have to slam your hand on your desk and say, just do it. But I have never met a civil servant who, in finest Sir Humphrey terms, would tell me that that was a bold decision, Minister. Broadly, they say yes.
But I mean, resistance to change is a pretty natural thing, isn't it? I mean, you know, we've seen Twitter go to 280 characters, and you couldn't believe the storm that's provoked. I mean, it is a normal human reaction, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, I think resistance to change is a normal human reaction, although I'm the first to say I can't bear the new 280 characters on Twitter. I don't actually think I've ever ventured into them. I think there was one occasion last week where we were having a discussion about whether I could just squeeze another few words in, and did. Do you know, I have, and this is to go completely off topic, I've always regarded us as a rather change-averse society. It's why I went into last year's EU referendum assuming that people would vote for the status quo, because actually change, difference was challenging, sometimes alarming. But you know, change can be good as well. So I think we have to, particularly in this environment, be prepared to be quite bold.
Last question from me. So the transformation strategy you were talking about earlier, and indeed the Conservative manifesto, both referred to the 25 million Verify users by 2020. Are you still confident that Verify is going to hit that target?
So I think we have to look at digital identity as an absolute imperative in the 21st century. What we do know is that there isn't an off-the-shelf product that you can simply go and buy, and we have done a phenomenal amount on the path to digital identity with Verify. But it's not an end in itself. It's about the access to services that a digital identity will give people. I was recently in Estonia talking about digital government, and people often hold Estonia up as a perfect example of where they have achieved great things. We already have more users on Verify than there are people in the whole of Estonia, and of course we come at it from a position where we do not have identity cards. They do. And I think that's a really distinct difference. I'm completely candid. There are challenges with Verify, but actually we have done good work so far. And for those people who are using it, we know that there is an 88% matching success rate. I have spoken to individuals who are using it and finding it easy and convenient. I myself went through the process of getting verified and timed it, and it took precisely 6 minutes, 10 seconds. Now, that doesn't mean that the journey is the same for everybody, and I completely acknowledge that it isn't, but I think we have to continue down the path towards a secure, safe digital identity for our citizens.
Thank you very much. Let me take some questions from the audience. Yes, at the front here, and then back there.
Thank you. Justin Sadler-Smith from SAP Ariba. So I was taken with the statistics on SMEs, and given the manifesto commitment on SMEs, I was interested in the Minister's view as to how you can reconcile the SME agenda along with the ever-increasing efficiency targets that are moving forward, whilst also having the budget constraints and the budget limitations that people have to take on board now. So how does the Minister think about how you can reconcile those three factors?
So I think that's a really important point, and I was struck when talking about the digital marketplace how well we have done in bringing SMEs into that, and 45% of 2.6 billion is not to be sniffed at all. I think one of the interesting things that we note with some of those SMEs is, of course, through their contracts with government through procurement, they are growing and no longer being SMEs. But I was fortunate, and do you know, I have perhaps one of the most wide-ranging, diverse roles in government. That chucks up some challenges, you're right to point them out, but it also gives me the opportunity to have a lot of interface with SMEs. I attended the SME panel in the Cabinet Office probably no more than 2 or 3 weeks ago, and was listening to their experiences of government procurement, working with government. They were really enamoured of facilities like Contracts Finder and our mystery shopper service, and had found them a real bonus and benefit. There is a fantastic quote which was delivered by the chairman of the Federation of Small Business, who was present and part of our panel, who described Contracts Finder and mystery shopper as being stonkingly good. Expect to hear that come out of my mouth in the chamber at some point. Not sure if it's parliamentary or not, but I acknowledge that there are challenges. You will know as well as I do that we released the statistics on SME contracts, I think last month. I think my mission and my vision when it comes to supporting SMEs is we have to find more opportunities for them. And actually, I'm not a brilliant bean counter, first to admit that. And I know that by digging down into the supply chain and demanding more and more information from each tier of supplier, actually we're making their life harder. That is not the job of government. We have to make it easier, and we also have to promote opportunities better. I was appalled to have a small businessman in my constituency, when I asked him if he knew anything of Contracts Finder, he said, I have no idea what you're talking about. So actually I take the view that in the Houses of Parliament there are 650 odd, I use the term advisedly, ambassadors who should be out in their constituencies talking to all of their SMEs about the opportunities that exist for government procurement and how to make the best of them. And do you know, I referenced it earlier, I was struck when I was at the DWP that we wanted to see more disabled people in the workplace, and set up a scheme called Disability Confident, and tried to convince colleagues to actually, every time they visit a business in their constituency, to ask them what they're doing about employing disabled people. And I have to say, now I find myself as the Minister with responsibility within the Cabinet Office for SME procurement, for civil service HR, actually one of my missions is to combine all of that. So every time I go into a business in Romsey and Southampton North now, I say to them, how many disabled people are you employing? Can we have a little discussion about your gender balance here? What are you doing about BAME recruitment? And why aren't you bidding for government contracts? And do you know, I think it's a challenge that every single MP is doing, and really we have to make sure that the opportunities that do exist are suitably advertised and known about.
Row behind there, and then back there.
From the Traffic Penalty Tribunal. And we're a local government tribunal, but we've recently gone through a transformation process in a year. And by the way, we used an SME, a tiny SME, and who built us an online appeals system. We're the first online tribunal in the country, with 310 local authorities all engaged. That's another story. We couldn't have done that unless 25 years ago, when I was already involved with this, I had written into our regulations a digital service on the tribunal of documents, and that's why we were able to leap forward. And an obvious problem, I think, throughout all departments, but especially HMCTS, is that there's endless regulations and legislation that requires first-class post, all sorts of things like that. And there seems to be urgently a need for a digital reform, a procedural reform bill, very quick one, saying anywhere where it says send things by first-class post, you can send it digitally. I suggested this ages ago, but it really, otherwise you're going to have to repeal all these things bit by bit. And the other thing is that I think that there are still regulations coming out with those requirements in, because they're copying old regulations, and there needs to be a digital impact assessment with every piece of legislation, as well as a financial impact assessment, to ensure that you aren't replicating those barriers that hold up things. And it's a huge problem for HMCTS, because of course the judges want the law to be abided by, of course, and so unless you make the law fit for this, it's very difficult.
Okay, so I'm going to start with a shameless message of congratulations that 25 years ago you had the foresight to think of that. I think 25 years ago I was probably still at university and not thinking about anything remotely digital. I think you make a really, really important point, and as we were walking over here this morning, we were having conversation about HMCTS and the regulation and the old systems and practices. And, if you were to talk to my daughter today about a fax machine, she would look at you as if you were mad and have no idea what you were even talking about. I drift off into the slightly anecdotal. I can remember trying to fend off an urgent question in the House, and members submit UQs, and we have to reply to them explaining to Mr. Speaker why this is not urgent, it's not a question, and is of no significance to anyone. And there's a parley team in every government department that spends an awful lot of time doing this. And the morning that I got UQ'd in the DWP, there was some problem with our email system. These happen. I think there had been a cable dug up outside Caxton House. And we literally were scrabbling around trying to find a functioning fax machine so we could get the message back to Mr. Speaker. And I was looking at this machine aghast. God, I didn't know they existed still. And then to hear that these are common currency in our courts and tribunal systems, that really does make me cringe. Now, I will be in trouble up to my little neck if I sit here and promise any legislation, however quick and dirty a bill it is. So I'm not going to do that, but thank you for making that point to me. That is something that I absolutely, and particularly as we face the challenges of Brexit, there actually may well be opportunities as we have to incorporate all sorts of legislation into our law. There may be opportunities to make progress, but I can promise, I regret, no more than that.
Thank you. I wasn't expecting you to commit to a bill.
And HMCTS are reinventing the wheel, by the way, because somebody else has got there first.
We've got two on the front row here and then back here. Yeah.
James Kidner from Improbable. We're a tech startup in the games platforms and also larger simulation field. It's a fascinating talk and very encouraging to an audience like this, but I want to stand back from the sort of SW1 perspective and ask how it will be taken the sort of furthest reaches of the kingdom. You referenced the Amazon and John Lewis and our addiction to them sort of early on, and you also later on talked about how shocked you were by the Brexit outcome where we voted against the status quo. And I guess my question is, where will this end? The Conservative Party was traditionally a party of small government, and if you, as you say, efficiency doesn't mean savings, there is the capacity inexorably, as Amazon wishes to do, to sort of, in a sense, take over the world. What's the stop on the government efficiency in the digital domain, stealthily or steadily increasing the role of government in all our lives?
Can we take the question next to you as well, because we haven't got much time left.
Thank you. Ollie Lewis, GDS. My question is about those people who might be excluded from engaging with digitally default services. So those people who are incapable of understanding, say, the logic of digital services and the way in which the digital world conducts itself, or those people who are incapable of accessing those services because they don't have the technology or the money to run mobile data services.
Some meaty questions for you there.
Yeah, so I never said I had an addiction to John Lewis. That's a vicious slur. And I have a nasty feeling, or maybe it's a good feeling, that I used Improbable as an example when I went off to the Channel Islands last week for the British Irish Council and was talking about the creative industries. And I said to officials, I want 2 really cracking examples that you can give me, and I have a feeling that Improbable was one of them. I was certainly talking about gaming. Where will this end? Gosh, I don't have a crystal ball any more than you do. And it would be really handy if I did. I wish I had sort of 25 years foresight that we heard about from over there a moment ago. And I'm never ashamed of this. I'm a Tory. I was about to say I'm a proper Tory, but I really am. And so I do believe in small government, but I also believe in government doing stuff better. And I was trying to promise myself I would get through this morning without using the word stuff or the word things, and I know that they've both come out of my mouth now. So I think what digital gives us is the opportunity to be a hell of a lot smarter about the way we operate, about the way we interact with our citizens, about the service we provide them, its speed and its competence. And I'm going to segue sweetly into the question of accessibility at the same time, because I was really struck when I went to GDS as a brand new minister with the whole of the media explaining to the world that I knew an awful lot about ponies and nothing about digital. A little bit upsetting maybe. Actually, I'd come from the DWP, where our focus was on accessibility and about making sure that there are opportunities for people with learning disabilities, with people with physical disabilities, to get them into the workplace, to make their lives easier through all of our programs and schemes. And so my first question in GDS was probably around the lines of how are you making sure that this is deliverable to everybody? Because I'm really conscious that we have millions of people in this country who are digitally excluded for a whole variety of reasons. And you might expect me to say this, coming from rural Hampshire, which I'm a bit fond of pointing out is not the Outer Hebrides. Do you know, the element that we missed out there is those who are excluded because they can't get access to decent broadband speeds. And that's a huge challenge in rural areas, and certainly for small businesses can be a massive barrier to them. So I think we have challenges. I know that my colleague in the world of being a government minister and in the world of digital, Matt Hancock, has some brilliant initiatives and some good news, I think, to report by the end of the year on broadband rollout. But I have to say my abiding concern, and we do discuss this a massive amount of the time, is actually how you make services properly accessible. So I talked briefly about interaction with AI and voice assist technologies, and we know that older people actually are more inclined to use voice assist than I am. I don't have a Alexa thing in my house, largely because I'm never there and there doesn't seem much point, but I use Siri endlessly, having discovered how easy it is. And I look at my parents, who are both in their mid-70s, and people talk to them about the elderly being digitally excluded. Absolute bunkum. I mean, the old boy is not very good at attaching photographs to an email, but he does everything electronically now, and I really do wish he didn't do quite so much online shopping. And do you know, that's the reality. We have to make sure, and it's very true that particularly for people with learning difficulties, actually, if we base some of our services around making them as accessible and as straightforward and as intuitive as possible for those who do have learning difficulties, actually, it makes it easier for me to use. And I think that's a really, really important principle.
Thank you. Up the front here, and then Alex Allen. Let's take two together.
Thank you, Minister. My name is Siobhan Coughlin. I work for the Local Government Association. Just picking up on the ambitions around Verify. I wonder if there's a real opportunity to expand that, and yes, you're piloting with some local authorities, but perhaps if we use local authority data. So, for example, the verified data that we've got on the electoral register and things like the council tax database. That would expand the usability, but more importantly, it would give access to some people who can't use some of the current providers of the Verify service because they don't have a bank account or whatever.
And Alex Allen, the former EM boy.
I want to ask about digital record keeping, both about how the government's dealing with the mess of past records and the impossibility of finding anything that happened only a few years ago, and also about how government going forward is going to make it easier for civil servants to actually store records in a sensible and accessible way.
Sorry, let me just scribble that before I forget the second question. The LGA, now I think that's really interesting, because we were talking yesterday about local authority use of data and Verify, and I sent my officials off to tell me exactly how Hampshire County Council and Southampton City Council were doing on this front, and was interested to hear that Southampton had been part of a pilot on Verify but had dropped out of it. Now, I think we need to find better ways to, I'm going to use a terrible non-technical term, hook into the data that local government holds. I am really conscious that we have some people for whom Verify will be difficult because they move home a lot, even within local authorities, who don't have driving licences. Now, this is not a problem in my constituency, because let me tell you, you turn 17, living in Romsey, you learn to drive. There is no alternative. But actually, I talk to most of my staff who are London-based, who simply don't drive, and therefore have never seen the need to have a driving licence. And therefore, there are real challenges around people who move home a lot, might not have a driving licence. This probably describes pretty much every 21-year-old in London, doesn't it? And so I think that we need to be able to work better with local authorities, the LGA in particular. I'm a huge fan of local authorities, and I'm sure that's sort of my, I was going to say dodgy background, but actually a really enjoyable 12 years as a local councillor. And I know the strengths that local government has, and we should be making as good use of it as possible. And I believe that CLG are doing some really great pilots and work on that. Second question about record keeping and making it accessible. So I'm going to just ramble a bit. I can remember years ago being, I'm not sure whether I was appalled or sort of a little bit intrigued by the fact that some disused nuclear, I'm going to use the word tunnels, but actually sort of tubes dug into the side of a place called Dean Hill in my constituency were being used to store government records, because actually if it's secure enough for a nuclear weapon, then it's probably secure enough for some government records. I think, you know, I don't know whether I'm going to say real fear, and I think I probably do mean fear, is about security, and it's about keeping people's data as safe as we possibly can. And that is our real challenge. As I sort of rather glibly said earlier, we're not a multinational corporation, we're not Google or Amazon, we're government, and we have a real duty to our citizens to keep their records secure, but also to make data accessible so that we can do government a bit better, and so that we can make sure that we're delivering services that are appropriate and in line with what people need. And there is a very significant balancing act to be perfected there, and I'm not sure that we have it right yet, but we work really hard to make sure that we will have it right.
Thank you very much. I think we're out of time, unfortunately, but thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much for fielding all of the questions on all of these different issues. Please join me in thanking Caroline Nokes MP.